The Vorith were an ancient race, older than most of the civilizations in the galaxy. They traveled the stars in vast fleets, moving from planet to planet, not to explore or to trade, but to consume. Their hive mind, a single entity with millions of individuals working together, had already destroyed countless worlds. Their ships moved like locusts, devouring everything in their path. Cities, forests, oceans, nothing was safe. It had started with small, remote colonies. The Trilarian Alliance, a group of peaceful and highly advanced civilizations, had fought back with everything they had, but nothing worked. The Vorith swarm could adapt, learn, and grow stronger with each battle. The Alliance's ships, weapons, and technologies were no match for the swarm. After losing battle after battle, many planets fell silent, their populations wiped out. It wasn't long before the last remaining Alliance worlds were on the brink of collapse. One by one, their defense systems fell. Cities crumbled to dust. The once advanced space fleets turned to rust. The survivors, those lucky enough to escape, fled to the last remaining strongholds, hiding in the shadows of space. But even those refuges couldn't last forever. On one such world, the survivors gathered around a single glowing signal. The Trilarian Military Council sat in their command center, their faces pale with worry. Their once great civilization was crumbling, and the Vorith were closing in. "We can't survive this," Commander Valtrak said, his voice quiet, almost resigned. He looked around at the faces of his fellow officers, all filled with the same fear. "Our fleets are gone. The last of our defenses have been wiped out. If we don't get help, we'll all perish." The room fell into silence. "I have been tracking a signal," said a young officer, her voice shaky. She stood at the back, hunched over a console, her fingers trembling as she typed. "It's faint, but it's coming from Earth." "Earth?" Commander Valtrak scoffed. "What hope could a primitive planet like that possibly offer us?" The young officer continued, "I know it's a long shot, but Earth is one of the few places in the galaxy that still has untouched technology. Their military might be primitive, but they've never been part of any galactic alliance. Maybe they have something we don't know about." The officers exchanged glances. It was a gamble, but at this point, it was their only option. If the Vorith destroyed everything they had worked for, the galaxy would fall into darkness. The message was sent, a desperate plea for help, hoping that the people of Earth, who had been ignored for so long by the galaxy's powers, would somehow answer. Far away on Earth, life went on as usual. The people had no idea what was happening across the stars. They lived in their small, quiet world, focusing on their own problems, unaware of the galaxy's suffering. Earth had been left out of the great intergalactic councils, and many didn't even believe the stories of alien visitors or space battles. To most, the idea that Earth could play a role in the galaxy's survival seemed laughable. The United Nations Defense Coalition, UNDC, had been quietly building its strength, preparing for possible threats, though they were mostly concerned with their own planet's safety. Captain Alinga Reyes, a highly skilled officer in the UNDC, sat at her desk when the message came through. It was a standard transmission at first, but as she listened to the words, "Help, the galaxy is dying. Earth is our last hope," her heart sank. She wasn't the only one who received it. Earth's leaders had heard the plea, and they too were in shock. They had no idea who these people were, or even if this was a real threat. But the desperation in the message was undeniable. "We can't ignore this," Captain Rice said aloud to her team, her voice steady, though a spark of fear flickered in her eyes. "We're their last chance." The room fell silent for a moment. There was no denying it. Earth, the planet that had been ignored for so long, was now the galaxy's final hope. What could a planet of 7 billion people with outdated weapons and limited space exploration do against an unstoppable alien swarm? But Captain Reyes wasn't one to give up. She knew Earth's potential. It wasn't just about technology. It was about human resilience. the ability to survive, to adapt, to fight when everything seemed lost. She stood up, her hands clenched into fists, and looked at her team. "We don't have all the answers, but we can do this. We have to. We'll answer their call." With that, the message was sent to the Trilarian survivors. Earth was coming. The humans would fight. They didn't know how yet, but they would do whatever it took to save the galaxy. The message was short, but it carried the weight of the entire galaxy's survival. The leaders of Earth, still reeling from the news that their planet was now the last hope for countless worlds, were gathered in the United Nations Defense Coalition's headquarters. There were no grand speeches, no promises of victory, just a cold, hard truth. "Do we have a chance?" Captain Alina Reyes asked as she stood before a room full of the Earth's top military and scientific minds. The room was quiet. The question hung in the air like an unspoken weight. General Howard Grant, an experienced officer with years of battle under his belt, was the first to speak. "The Vorth swarm is unlike anything we've ever faced. They're relentless, adaptive, and have already wiped out entire systems. They don't stop until everything is consumed." "But they didn't stop us," Reyes replied, her voice firm. "We may not have their advanced tech or fleets, but we've survived for centuries without them. That's something they've never encountered before." Her words were met with a few nods, but many faces were still filled with doubt. Earth was still developing in terms of space exploration. The planet's ships were not designed for full-scale intergalactic warfare, and their technologies were considered outdated compared to what the Trilarian Alliance or the Vorth possessed. "We've been preparing for decades," Rice continued. "We've built a small but powerful military force, and while our technology is not as advanced as theirs, we have something the Vorth don't expect: human resourcefulness." The room grew tense. Rice could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. She knew that the task ahead was daunting, but she had no choice but to believe in Earth's strength. The fate of the galaxy rested on her and the soldiers who would follow her into the unknown. After a long pause, the UNDC commander, General Grant, nodded. "Prepare the fleet. We'll send whatever we can. Earth's answer has been given." The days that followed were filled with urgency. Captain Reyes and her team worked tirelessly, coordinating efforts with the UNDC to prepare for the unknown. The fleet was small, barely large enough to make an impact in a full-scale battle, but it would have to do. Earth's best scientists and engineers quickly began modifying ships, creating new weapons, and repurposing technology to be more effective against the Vorth. While the military worked on the logistics, the scientists focused on learning everything they could from the few transmissions received from the Alliance survivors. There was little information, but one thing was clear: the Vorth communicated in ways humans had never encountered before. Their hive mind, a single massive intelligence that spanned the entire species, was their greatest weapon and their greatest weakness. If Earth could find a way to exploit that, there might be a chance. Captain Rice spent sleepless nights in the command center, staring at the galaxy map on the screen in front of her. The Trilarian worlds that had once been full of life were now just dots of faded light, swallowed by the dark expanse of space. The swarm was not far, and Earth's fleet, though prepared, would have to face them head-on. Finally, the day came. The fleet, though small, was ready to leave. It wasn't a massive armada, but it was Earth's best hope. With the Trilarian survivors waiting on the other side, Captain Reyes knew that they couldn't afford to waste time. Every second counted. As the ships lifted off from Earth's surface, there was a moment of awe. Humanity had always dreamed of reaching the stars, but now they were doing it not for exploration or conquest, but for survival. Earth's fleet was no match for the might of the Vorth on its own, but the human spirit was resilient, and that spirit was carried in every ship that now soared into the void. The journey would take several weeks, and Rice spent much of it with her crew, preparing them mentally and emotionally for what was to come. Every person on board the fleet knew that they were heading into the heart of enemy territory, where the Vorth would stop at nothing to destroy them. As Earth's fleet approached the Trilarian stronghold, They received their first direct communication with the survivors. Commander Valtrax, once skeptical of humanity, now spoke with a hint of cautious hope. "You've made it," he said, his voice crackling through the comms. "We didn't think it possible, but you're here. The last of the Alliance is counting on you." Rise looked at the faces of her crew, the weight of the moment heavy on their hearts. The survivors of the Alliance, having fought alone for so long, now had Earth at their side. It was a strange alliance, humans and aliens fighting together against a common enemy, but it was their only chance. "We're ready," Captain Rice replied, her voice steady. "We'll fight until the end." The fleet was about to enter the heart of the swarm's domain. For Earth, this was the moment when the galaxy's fate would be decided. Would humanity's resilience be enough to turn the tide, or would they too be swept away by the Vorith? The answer was still unknown, but one thing was certain. Humanity would give everything to answer the call. The darkness of space stretched out in every direction as Earth's fleet approached the last known stronghold of the Trilarian survivors. Captain Alina Reyes stood on the bridge of the lead ship, staring at the galaxy map projected before her. The fleet, though small, had the strength of determination behind it. This mission was more than just a fight for survival. It was the galaxy's last hope. As the ships moved closer to the Trilarian outpost, Reyes couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. The Trilarians had fought so hard to survive, only to be left with one final desperate chance. Earth's fleet was their last lifeline. And yet, with every passing moment, the reality of the situation began to settle in. "We're approaching the coordinates," said Lieutenant Davis, who stood beside Reyes. "The Trilarian outpost is just ahead. They've asked us to approach cautiously." Reyes nodded. The Vorith swarm had no mercy, and a careless move could cost them everything. She glanced at the crew, who were all working in sync, preparing for whatever came next. "Let's move out," Reyes ordered, her voice calm but filled with determination. The fleet slowed as they approached the Trilarian station, a massive structure that once housed a thriving population. Now it was a shadow of its former self, dark, silent, and eerily still. Reyes knew that it had been a long time since the Trilarians had seen any peace. The Vorith had stripped them of everything they once held dear. And now, Earth was here to help. As they neared the station, a communication signal blinked on the console. Reyes immediately activated it. "Captain Reyes," came the voice of Commander Valtrax, crackling through the static. "We are ready to receive you, but we are not alone." Reyes' heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "The Vorith are closing in." "They know we're here," Valtrax replied grimly. "But we've prepared the best we can. Your arrival is our only hope now." Reyes' mind raced. The Vorith were already on their way, and Earth's fleet hadn't even engaged yet. The pressure was on, and time was running out. "We'll land and make preparations immediately," she said, trying to hide the uncertainty in her voice. "We can't afford to waste another minute." The fleet moved into position, ready to dock with the Trilarian outpost. As the ships docked, Reyes could feel the weight of the moment. This was no longer just a mission. It was a fight for everything. The lives of the Trilarians, the future of Earth, and the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The hatch opened, and Reyes stepped out, flanked by her crew. The Trilarian survivors greeted them in silence, their faces weary but filled with a quiet resolve. It was clear they had seen much, lost much, and yet they were still standing, still fighting. Commander Valtrax, his face hard but with a flicker of hope in his eyes, walked forward to meet her. "Welcome to what's left of our home," he said. "I must admit, I did not expect Earth to respond. We thought our cries for help would fall on deaf ears." Reyes nodded. "Humanity doesn't back down from a fight. We'll do whatever it takes to end this." Valtrax led them to a large command center at the heart of the station. Screens filled with data from all over the galaxy flickered in front of them. Trilarian survivors worked in the background, their efforts a last-ditch attempt to hold off the oncoming storm. "We have only one plan left," Voltrax explained. "The Vorath hive mind is the key to their power. If we can sever their connection, we can cripple them. But the process is risky. If we fail, it could trigger a full-scale attack." Rise looked at the holographic map, her mind racing through the possibilities. "How do we sever the connection?" "There is a central node in their network. We've pinpointed its location," Voltrax replied. "But the Vorath are always aware of any threat to their hive. If we want to succeed, we'll need a distraction. And that's where Earth's fleet comes in." Raya's heart beat faster as she understood the plan. Earth's fleet would be the bait, drawing the Vorath's attention away from the critical strike. It was a risky move, but they didn't have time for a safer option. "We'll do it," she said firmly. "We'll give you the distraction you need." The team began their preparations. Earth's fleet was already in position, ready to launch an assault on the Vorath forces as soon as they detected the swarm's approach. Captain Rice knew that their fleet wasn't strong enough to defeat the Vorath directly, but it could buy the Trillarians the time they needed. Rice looked at her crew one last time before they moved out. "This isn't just about saving one world. It's about saving all worlds. If we don't stop the Vorath, no one will be safe." Her crew nodded. They had all accepted the risks, but the resolve in their eyes told Rice they were ready. Earth was no longer the forgotten planet. It was the final stand against the darkness. As the fleet launched its first wave of fighters into space, Rice stood tall, watching the stars. There was no turning back now. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity would fight until the very end. The deep, cold void of space stretched endlessly in every direction as Captain Alina Rice stood at the helm of her ship. Her hands gripped the controls, her heart pounding. The plan was in motion. Earth's fleet had taken their positions, and the Trillarians were preparing to strike at the heart of the Vorath swarm's hive mind. "This is it," Lieutenant Davis said from beside her, his voice steady but tense. "The distraction is in place. The Vorath are moving toward our fleet." Reyes nodded. "Hold the line. We need to buy the Trillarians enough time to sever the hive's connection." All around them, the rest of the fleet was preparing for the incoming battle. Ships filled with Earth's bravest soldiers, humans who had never fought an alien force on this scale, were readying their weapons. The stakes were high, and the pressure was enormous. But they had no choice. There was only one shot at this. The Vorath fleet, a dark, menacing formation of ships, loomed in the distance. Their ships were like nothing the humans had ever seen. Towering structures, shifting with strange patterns, designed to intimidate and overwhelm. But the human fleet was undeterred. They had something the Vorath didn't, an unbreakable will. "Prepare for battle," Rise ordered, her voice calm but commanding. "Engage the Vorath as soon as they enter range." The fighters in Earth's fleet launched into space with a powerful burst, their engines leaving trails of bright blue as they sped toward the incoming Vorath ships. It wasn't the largest force, but it was the best humanity could muster. Every pilot, every soldier knew what was at stake. As the first shots were fired, the chaos of battle erupted around them. The Vorath ships retaliated, their weapons firing energy blasts that tore through the darkness. Earth's ships responded, dodging, weaving, and returning fire with everything they had. The air was thick with tension, and every second counted. Captain Rice watched the screens, keeping an eye on the status of her fleet and the Trillarians. She could feel her heart race with every explosion, every near miss. The Trillarians had already launched their strike teams, moving swiftly to infiltrate the heart of the Vorath hive. Now, it was up to Earth's fleet to keep the Vorath distracted long enough to allow the Trillarians to succeed. "Target their command ships," Rise ordered. "Take down their leadership." The command ships were the brains of the Vorath swarm, directing the movements of their fleet. Without them, the Vorath would be much easier to defeat. Earth's fleet fighters and capital ships focused their fire on the massive Vorath structures, trying to weaken their grip on the battle. The Vorith, however, were relentless. Their ships seemed to shift, adapting to every attack. It was as if they were learning, adjusting their tactics in real time. But humanity was no stranger to fighting against the odds. Earth's ships were small, fast, and incredibly agile. They had to be. As the battle raged on, a new wave of Vorith fighters descended upon Earth's fleet, their ships swarming like angry hornets. The human fleet did their best to fend them off, but there were too many. The sky, or rather the black expanse of space, was filled with the roar of weapons, the explosions lighting up the darkness like fireflies. Ray's ship was struck by a blast, knocking it off course. The lights flickered, and alarms began blaring in the background. "Damage report," Ray shouted, gripping the controls tightly. "Shields are down to 40%. Hull breach in the starboard engine," came the response from her crew. "Can we still fight?" Rise asked. "Affirmative," the officer replied. "We're still operational, but we'll need to make a move soon." Rise looked at the battlefield around them. The distraction was working, but the price was steep. Earth's fleet was taking heavy losses. They had only a small number of ships left to keep the Vorith at bay, but every second counted. She had to trust that the Trilarians would do their part. On the surface of the Trilarian station, the Trilarian warriors had already breached the outer defenses of the Vorith hive. Commander Valtrax led the charge, his people moving with a speed and precision that was unmatched. They knew that failure meant the end of their civilization, and they fought like it. "We're close," Valtrax's voice crackled over the comms. "We've reached the central node. We're going in." Rice took a deep breath. She couldn't imagine the danger Valtrax and his team were facing, but she knew that their success was the key to everything. If the Trilarians could sever the Vorith hive mind, it would be a game changer. The Vorith would lose their coordination, their strength, and their ability to fight as a single unit. But just as hope sparked in Raya's chest, a sudden, chilling realization struck her. The Vorith were learning. They were adapting faster than anyone had anticipated, and they had one more trick up their sleeve. Raya's eyes widened as she watched the massive Vorith command ship in the distance. It began to glow, its energy signature spiking. Then, without warning, it unleashed a devastating wave of energy, tearing through the battle like a blade through paper. "Brace for impact," Rai shouted, pulling the ship into a sharp dive. The blast missed them by mere inches, but several other ships weren't so lucky. The Vorith had just shown their hand. The battle was far from over. And now, Earth's fleet had to fight not only to survive, but to turn the tide of the war in their favor. The battle in space raged on, and Captain Alina Reyes could feel the pressure mounting with each passing second. Earth's fleet had already taken heavy losses, but they were holding their ground. The Vorith command ship's blast had shaken their resolve, but the crew refused to give up. Humanity had always been known for its determination, and this battle would be no different. "Captain, the Vorith are regrouping," Lieutenant Davis reported, his voice tense. "They've adapted their tactics, and they're sending in more reinforcements. It's getting worse." Reyes glanced at the status screens. The once stable formation of Earth's ships was beginning to crack. The Vorith were overwhelming them with sheer numbers. But they couldn't afford to lose focus now, not when they were so close to the edge of victory. "Don't let up," Reyes ordered, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "We need to keep their attention. The Trilarians are counting on us." As she spoke, a flare of light erupted from the distance. The Vorith were launching another massive wave of attack ships. They came in like a storm, their black, jagged forms surrounding the human fleet. Earth's ships scattered, dodging the incoming fire, but the Vorith were relentless. The energy blasts hit with a thunderous force, and one of Earth's ships, the Sovereign Dawn, was struck directly in its side. The ship listed to the side, its lights flickering, and the sounds of alarms echoed through the communication channels. "Sovereign Dawn is going down," a voice cried out from the communications officer. "They're taking heavy damage." Reyes clenched her fists. Losing the ship meant losing more than just equipment. It meant losing lives. Earth's fleet had already lost too many, but they had to keep pushing forward. There was no other option. Move in closer to the Vorith formation. Reyes commanded. We need to force them into a position where they can't focus on all fronts. The crew members responded immediately. The ship shifted formation, narrowing the gap between them and the Vorith's relentless assault. The human fighters moved in, engaging the Vorith directly, their weapons flashing as they attacked with precision and speed. Earth's ships may have been outnumbered, but they had the advantage of quick, decisive movements. Meanwhile, on the Trilarian station, Commander Valtrax's team was closing in on their objective. They had breached the outer defenses of the Vorith hive mind's core, but they still had a long way to go. The station's corridors were dim, with the faint hum of machinery echoing throughout. Valtrax's soldiers moved silently, their eyes sharp and focused, aware that any noise could alert the Vorith to their presence. "We're almost there," Valtrax whispered to his second-in-command, a young Trilarian officer named Corin. "Stay sharp. The Vorith will be aware of us soon." Corin nodded, gripping his weapon tightly. "We will succeed, Commander. The future of our people depends on it." The central chamber was just ahead. It was the heart of the Vorith's hive mind, a massive, pulsating structure that connected the entire swarm. Valtrax knew that this was the key to everything. If they could sever the connection between the Vorith, the swarm would fall into chaos, and humanity's distraction would finally buy them the time they needed. "Get ready," Valtrax ordered. "Once we're in, we can't waste time. Destroy the core as quickly as possible." As the team entered the chamber, a chilling sense of dread filled the air. The core of the hive mind was a massive organic structure, its surface writhing with energy. Tentacle-like appendages stretched out from the core, feeding into the network that linked the entire Vorith swarm. It was a terrifying sight, but Valtrax and his team stood firm. "We've got this," Corin said, setting the charges. "Let's end this once and for all." Back in space, Captain Reyes watched the battle unfold, her mind racing. The Vorith fleet had regrouped, but Earth's ships were holding strong. The distraction was working. As the human fleet engaged in dogfights with the Vorith ships, the Vorith hive mind was distracted, just enough for the Trilarians to get close to the core. "We can't give up now," Reyes muttered to herself. "Not when everything is on the line." Then the unexpected happened. A blip appeared on the radar. A new enormous Vorith ship, unlike anything they had seen before, emerged from the shadows of space. It was massive, its hull bristling with deadly energy weapons. The Vorith had brought in their ultimate weapon. "They've got a new ship," Davis reported, his voice tight. "It's unlike anything we've encountered." Reyes' heart sank. "What do we know about it?" "Too little," Davis replied. "It's massive, and it's coming straight for us." The new Vorith ship began charging its weapons, its energy signature rising rapidly. Reyes could feel the tension in the air. If that ship fired on their fleet, it would obliterate them in an instant. But there was no time to think. They had to act. "All ships, form up. We'll face it head-on," Reyes commanded. Humanity had always fought back when the odds seemed impossible. This new weapon was a challenge, but Reyes wasn't about to let it destroy their chance of victory. "Prepare for impact," she shouted, gripping the control panel. The Vorith ship fired, and a brilliant beam of energy shot toward the fleet. But before it could make contact, Earth's fighters darted in, using their superior speed and agility to block the beam and redirect its course. "This isn't over yet," Reyes muttered to herself as she watched the Vorith ship react to the unexpected counterattack. Humanity had fought back against all odds, and now, in the final moments, they would fight harder than ever. The tension in the command center was unbearable. Captain Alina Reyes stared at the view screen, her eyes locked on the massive Vorith flagship that loomed over the battlefield. The human fleet, though battered, had not surrendered. Despite the overwhelming odds, they were still in the fight. "We have to hold our ground," Rice said, her voice firm. "We can't let them break through." Around her, the crew worked frantically. The hum of engines, the beep of incoming transmissions, and the rush of urgency filled the room. Everyone knew that this would be the turning point. If they failed now, the Vorith would overwhelm Earth. The future of humanity rested on their next move. "Captain, the Vorith flagship is charging up its weapons," Lieutenant Davis called out. "They're preparing to fire." Raya's eyes widened as the energy readings shot up on her screen. The flagship was preparing something even more powerful than the previous shots. If that beam hit them, it could end the battle in a single strike. "Dodge! Now!" Ray shouted. The Earth fleet scattered in all directions, their engines roaring as they pushed to outrun the impending destruction. Fighters darted left and right, desperately trying to avoid the path of the massive weapon. The flagship's beam shot out, slicing through space with terrifying force. But humanity's ships had learned from the previous attack. With quick reflexes, they managed to avoid the brunt of the blast. The beam exploded against the shields of one of the smaller Earth ships, but the shields held firm, barely. The ship groaned under the strain, but it continued its evasive maneuvers. "We've got this," Rise whispered under her breath, feeling a flicker of hope. Meanwhile, on the Trillarian station, Commander Valtrax and his team were in the heart of the Vorith hive mind's core. They had set the charges and now had only moments before the core would be destroyed. But the deeper they went into the chamber, the more dangerous it became. The Vorith were beginning to realize that their link to the hive mind was being severed. "We don't have much time," Valtrax said, as he and his soldiers crouched behind the alien machinery, keeping low as Vorith drones scurried past them. "Let's finish this and get out." Corin nodded, his weapon ready. "This ends today." The Vorith hive mind pulsed violently, sending out waves of energy that could be felt through the floor. The air seemed to crackle with static electricity as Valtrax placed the final charge onto the core. He activated the detonator, a small device designed to trigger the destruction of the hive mind's central processor. He could feel the vibration of the countdown, each second stretching out in anticipation. Then, with a sudden surge of light and energy, the core erupted. A massive shockwave rippled through the entire station, knocking Valtrax and his team off their feet. The lights flickered, and alarms blared in every direction. "We've done it," Corin gasped, still dazed from the explosion. Valtrax climbed to his feet, his eyes burning with determination. "Now we get out before we're buried under the rubble." Back in space, the explosion sent a wave of disruption through the Vorith fleet. The Vorith flagship staggered, its energy pulse faltering. Earth's fighters, sensing the shift in momentum, launched an all-out assault. This was the chance they had been waiting for. "Now we push back," Rise ordered, her voice a rallying cry. With the Vorith's hive mind destabilized, the swarm began to lose coordination. The once organized Vorith fleet was now scattered, their ships attacking aimlessly. This was humanity's chance to strike. Rise and her crew watched as Earth's ships surged forward, firing at will. One by one, the Vorith ships were picked off. The human fleet, now re-energized by the knowledge of their victory on the ground, fought harder than ever. "Take them down," shouted Lieutenant Davis, his hands flying over the controls as he maneuvered their ship into position. The human fleet moved like a well-oiled machine, striking with precision and speed. Every ship in the fleet seemed to be working as one, coordinated in a way that made it clear that the Vorith had underestimated humanity's unity and determination. As Earth's ships closed in, the Vorith flagship began to turn, attempting to make a desperate last stand. It fired another massive energy beam. But this time, the humans were ready. Earth's fighters swarmed the flagship, weaving in and out of the attack's path, their weapons blazing. Captain Reyes held her breath as the flagship's shields began to flicker. They had her now. "Prepare to launch the final strike," Rice said, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. The fighter pilots moved in, closing the gap with incredible speed. The Vorith flagship attempted to fire one more time, but the energy core was unstable. It was too late. Earth's fighters hit the flagship's weak spot, and the ship erupted in a violent explosion. For a moment, there was silence. And then, cheers erupted from the human fleet. The Vorith flagship was gone. The swarm was in disarray. "We did it," Lieutenant Davis whispered, his voice full of awe. But Captain Rice knew that the battle wasn't over yet. They had won a major victory, but the Vorith were still out there. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to overcome. But humanity had proven one thing today. When the stakes were at their highest, when everything seemed lost, they would rise. They would never give up. The aftermath of the battle was still unfolding across space. The once immense Vorith fleet was now shattered, with scattered wreckage floating through the void. The massive flagship, which had struck fear into the hearts of millions, was nothing more than a twisted heap of metal and broken systems. On Earth, the news spread quickly. It was a victory that would go down in history, but the cost had been immense. Cities had been leveled, countless lives had been lost, and the scars of the war would last for generations. Yet there was also hope. The human spirit had proven resilient, and in the darkest of times, humanity had risen to the challenge. Captain Alina Reyes stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, looking out at the stars. The battle was over, but the war had left its mark. Her crew had been through so much, and now it was time to rebuild. Yet even as she gazed at the quiet void, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had only just begun. "We did it, Captain," Lieutenant Davis said quietly, walking up beside her. "We actually did it." Reyes nodded but didn't respond right away. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on the thousands of families that had lost loved ones, on the homes that would never be rebuilt. "Yes, but it's not over. We still have a galaxy to heal." Davis didn't argue. He understood. While the battle was a turning point, there was still a long road ahead. "Do you think they'll try again?" Davis asked. "Possibly," Reyes replied, her gaze never leaving the vastness of space. "But we're ready now. We've shown the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated. They can't take us down that easily." Meanwhile, Commander Valtrax and his team had made it back to their ship. The station was a wreck, but the mission had been a success. The destruction of the Vorith hive mind had been critical in tipping the scales in humanity's favor. As they made their way back to Earth, Valtrax took a deep breath, knowing that the victory was bittersweet. "We've won," Valtrax said, but his voice lacked the triumphant edge it should have had. "But we've lost so much." Corin, his second in command, placed a hand on his shoulder. "We saved countless lives, Commander. That's what matters now. We'll rebuild. Together." It wasn't just a battle for Earth. It had been a battle for every world that had ever been touched by the Vorith. The message had been sent across the stars. Humanity would not kneel. And now, the entire galaxy would have to come to terms with that. Back on Earth, the leaders of the planet gathered in the capital city. Earth's victory was a global event, one that would redefine human history. But even as they celebrated, they knew there was more work to be done. The Vorith had been driven back, but they were not completely gone. And there were other alien forces out there, watching and waiting. The Earth leaders, united by their shared survival, began to discuss the future. They spoke of alliances, of peace talks, and of a new era of intergalactic cooperation. They understood now that Earth could no longer be isolated. Humanity had proven its strength and resilience, but it was clear that the future would depend on working with others, not just fighting. "We must rebuild," President Harper said, addressing the Global Council. "But we must also be ready. The galaxy will be watching us now, and we have to show that we are capable of both strength and compassion. We are no longer just one planet in the vastness of space. We are part of something much bigger." The people of Earth, though weary, stood united. They had fought for their survival, and now they would fight for a future where peace could flourish. The lessons of the war, though harsh, had brought humanity closer together. It was a reminder of the power of unity, of the incredible strength that could come when people worked together toward a common goal. As Captain Reyes watched the stars once more, she could almost feel the weight of the future pressing in. But this time, it didn't seem as daunting. Humanity had proven that even in the face of extinction, they would stand tall. They would fight, and they would prevail. "Captain," Lieutenant Davis said, breaking her thoughts, "we've received a message from the Trilarian leaders. They want to talk. They're asking for an alliance." Reyes smiled, a small but genuine smile. "That's a start. Let's see what they have to offer." With the dawn of this new era, humanity was ready to embrace the future. The war had changed them, but it had also shown them what they were truly capable of. The galaxy had witnessed their strength, and now they would see their capacity for hope, for peace, and for a future where humans stood as equals among the stars. As the Vanguard cruised into the heart of the galaxy, Reyes knew that their journey had only just begun. The challenges ahead would be great, but the fire of human determination burned brighter than ever. Whatever came next, they would face it together.